Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
The High Lords of Prythian wage war against the king of Hybern and his armies. Unlikely aid comes in the form of Tamlin, Beren, Jirian, and Grayson, and yet it's still not enough to fend off Hybern or its armada of reinforcements. Not even the arrival of Draken, Mirian, Lucian, and the human armies can turn the tide, and so a final sacrifice must be given, but too many losses push our heroes too far in their efforts to save the world they love.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author. This podcast is a discussion shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of the book, series spoilers may be discussed with or without warning. Explicit language, as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, death, and depression will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we're exploring Sarah J. Maas's most ambitious novel in the Court of Thorns and Roses series. This is Jac.
And I'm Amy. This week, we're discussing chapters 70 through 77 in A Court of Wings and Ruin.
The question we ask ourselves this week, is the way the final battle sequence written believable, or does too much happen?
Themes we see in this section include death and endings.
Before we start this, there's going to be a lot of Silver Flame spoiler, and if you haven't read Silver Flames at this point, we really can't help you, so please proceed with caution.
The final battle has begun. It is the start of Chapter 70. The Carver, Weaver, and Bryaxis are all out killing Hybern soldiers, and Rhys is smiling at Feyre. We didn't talk about it in last week's episode, but Feyre smiles at Rhys as she reveals the Carver and Bryaxis to him. Quote, not bothering to hide the savagery within it. This was meant to show Feyre was not holding back. She was being her full self in front of Rhys. I would argue Rhys is doing the same here. As Rhys smiles at Feyre, he returns Feyre's offering of her full self with his own offering of himself as he smiles at her and then mists part of Hybern's army. When is the other time we've ever seen Rhys use his misting powers on living beings? At the Summer Court attack. But Feyre was watching inside him rather than being there physically, and he kicked her out. Here, he is blatantly showing off his powers, and the two of them are well matched.
To go back to your smiling point, we're going to see a lot of misplaced smiling, and it's not me saying SJM made it weird, but rather the characters are showing more of a predatory, animalistic side to themselves. I'm particularly thinking about Nesta and Cassian later when it's their showdown with the King of Hybern. It's the smile before they know they're about to do something majorly powerful and majorly fucked up. Also, the ellipses in this section kind of stab me in the gut, and the reason why I think that is because people abuse ellipses. It's meant to be a dramatic pause. SGM uses it correctly, I will give her credit, but it's a lot of dramatic pauses, and that hurts my soul.
I'm not allowed to use ellipses? because of the pain that it inflicts.
Everyone I know stopped using ellipses, and not that you didn't use it correctly, excessively.
Yeah, it is excessive.
Yeah, it's like when people say, hi, ... how's it going? It's like, did you need a dramatic pause there? No. You said you know someone who signs their email off with the ellipses.
The last sentence ends with an ellipses before sincerely. Why?
Why was that needed?
The bone carver, now in the guise of an Illyrian soldier in his prime, side note, a grown Nyx, perhaps, fights the Hybern army with a scimitar of bone as if he were threshing wheat.
I like the idea of it being a grown Nyx. I don't know if it is, but I like it.
It probably isn't. You made a note during prep. He probably just wanted to fit in.
Yeah. I was like, yeah, it's like, hey guys, I'm cool too.
Or like he's obsessed with Rhys, so he just wanted to be Rhys for a moment.
Or like the way that now that I'm thinking, it's almost like because he knows he's going to die. It's like he wants to die feeling like he fits in a family. Because he never fit in with his siblings.
Aww. That's a great thought.
Yeah.
But sad.
Yeah. We're going to have a lot of that today.
Yeah, we are.
I love the imagery here with the carver and him thrashing through the wheat, because Feyre describes the carver as threshing wheat. What tools are used for harvesting wheat? A flail or a scythe, the same tool the Grim Reaper has. And I believe this is done on purpose. We have started to see the bone carver as a noble character, particularly so when we realize that he was expecting to die helping Feyre. We also know he does not associate with his sister Striga or with Koschei, who is really viewed as a cold-blooded killer. Striga, at least. I mean, yeah. And Koschei's not great either. And the carver is hanging out with Bryaxis, who I think we can all accept at this point is a big old puppy dog.
A puppy dog of death and
just
terror.
A Swedish little death terror puppy dog. The main thing I'm trying to get to, though, is that the bone carver isn't being linked to the Grim Reaper, something that brings death and is morbid, but rather a farmer who harvests and provides life.
Fantastic point.
Thank you.
Continuing on the bone carver, he's so powerful that Hybern is mere straw before him. And who controls the carver? Feyre. Feyre, who holds the carver's magical, mental leash and commands him and Bryaxis to obey. Think of Feyre from early Thorns and Roses, who quaked at the thought of stumbling upon a wolf in the woods, who was terrified of the bogey, now controlling and commanding a death god. That's a huge change for her character, but we believe it. And that's because SJM is a genius.
Oh, absolutely. My favorite quote from this moment is, quote, I rallied every scrap of night and starlight and snarled at them to obey. We've made things pretty clear at this point that darkness means Rhys, and Feyre has been associated with starlight. Think back to her starfall dress in the last book, and then she wears it again in this book. In this moment, Feyre is pulling Rhys's strength and her strength to get them to obey. We're starting to see her high ladiness come through. Like, she is the high lady of the Night Court here.
And we need that reminder before we get to the end of this section.
Mm-hmm.
Who comes to the aid of Prythian? Baron, Tamlin, Jurian, and Grayson, all individuals Feyre had assumed back in chapter 62 would never come to their aid. What I love, though, is that the differences each of these individuals have with the Inner Circle and other High Lords, those things aren't gone. At the core of their actions, their biases are still evident. Here are some examples. Baron doesn't want to be there, so Tamlin had to drag him out by his neck. And since Baron's family was the one who didn't want to take the Faebane antidote, it's not surprising that they're also the ones to remove the Faebane threat entirely by burning all the carriages full of Faebane. Tamlin, because of his history with Feyre and Rhys, doesn't want to talk to them, so Eris is the one showing up and doing the talking and being the middleman. Side note, I don't know how Jurian convinced Grayson to be here. I feel like Grayson is there as a writing device for Elaine more than I actually believe or understand him to have a purpose, other than the fact he has like pure unadulterated hatred for Faye.
I think that when we do the last episode, I'll talk about it a little bit more, but I'll tease it out here. I think he's there to have Elaine resent Lucian.
Interesting. So he's a writing device.
Yeah. So to what you're saying, exactly. For her plot growth. You know, I respect a man being the writing device.
More than a
finally.
woman. Yeah, fair.
Let's turn these tables. For whatever reason, I always find it kind of funny like one wave of help comes. Like, it's Baron, it's Tamlin, it's Grayson, and then it's Drake, and it's Miriam, it's Lucian, right? Like, it keeps coming. And it reminds me at the end of Pride and Prejudice when Mr. Bennet's like, is there any more men to propose? Anyone here wants any more daughters too? That's the same vibe that I'm getting. It's like, oh, cool. Anyone else want to show up and save us? Great.
Yeah.
I wonder, though, if Rhys knew that all of this crew was coming, or at least guessed that they would, because when the horns start to sound, that's when Rhys tells Feyre to go. When you compare this moment to when they see Draken, Rhys doesn't seem as disorientated. I also want to get into the idea that Tamlin had to drag Baron out to fight. That's an interesting dynamic because Baron is his friend's father from really probably his father's generation, and he forced him to do the right thing. I like to imagine that this is Tamlin doing what he wished he did to his own father during the last war to force him to do the right thing. Also, do we think the humans were winnowed in? Because they got there at the exact same time as all the other Fae. And this is me pushing some more thoughts here. Maybe it was Tamlin, since he's the one who borders the human court.
Honestly, I think that's an excellent idea, and you're probably right. Jurgen probably approached Tamlin, said, hey, I got the humans to come, so winnow them in. So Tamlin went and got Baron.
Yeah.
And then winnowed everybody in. Or at least winnowed the spring court and the humans in.
Yeah, because, like, the humans must have been winnowed. Like, because even the father, when he shows up, like, Miriam and Draken said they helped him through, right? Like, they pushed it along. There's no way that the humans were marching along, and there's no way that Baron was the one who winnowed them.
No. At the most, Baron winnowed his own people in.
Yeah.
But not the spring court, and definitely not the humans.
Absolutely. So, yeah, just a little food for thought.
And we don't get those details because now's not the time. But it's an excellent point.
Thank you.
Then it is time for Feyre, her sisters, and Amren to sneak through the battle behind the Weaver in order to find the cauldron. Before they depart, Feyre turns to look at Rhys so they can say a final farewell over the bond before they part, maybe forever.
Rhys and Feyre say so many final goodbyes in these chapters. A quick brush of the fingers, a longing to say goodbye mind to mind. It happens a few times over. SJM is doing this on purpose because we're on our guard like Feyre is. But when Rhys actually dies, that's when her guard is down, and that's when our guard is down, and we don't expect it.
You're right. We do see this a few times, and a few times the goodbye is ruined, just like now. Just like Feyre and Rhys didn't get to have a final evening together, they aren't even able to say farewell in this moment, because it's then that Nesta begins to sense the cauldron's power rising to blast away the army. Before Nesta screams for Cassian, her, quote, hair shakes free of her braid. Remember what I said a few episodes ago? For someone like Nesta, whose hair is always bound, it reflects her reservation, especially when it comes to her feelings. Nesta's hair falling away from her braid is a release, and as she calls for Cassian, she shows her true feelings, calling to save him from his death.
There's so many epic quotes in these last chapters, and we're going to quote them all. And Nesta screaming for Cassian, Cassian! Cassian! It's always going to be iconic.
Always. Jac and I have talked before how Nesta and Rhys might be our crack pairing, and here's one of the reasons why. Quote, Rhys was looking at Nesta like he knew, too, that she had saved Cassian from death. Like he didn't know whether to scold her for the guilt Cassian would no doubt feel, or thank her for saving him. These two are so alike because I know Rhys would have done the same. They just don't like to admit it.
No. There's going to be a couple of moments in this final epic battle where it sets up Rhys resenting Nesta in Silver Flames. Like this moment when she saves Cassian, Rhys is grateful, but he also knows that Cassian is going to experience a lot of guilt. And then when Nesta takes Cassian to be bait and likely die with Hybern, he's going to resent her all over again, and I'll get more into that later.
When the cauldron hits a second time, it takes out the bone carver. The scream Striga gives in warning and pain. Is it just me, or does this remind you of Elaine warning Feyre at the end of Mist and Fury when they're in Hybern? And I'm specifically speaking of a moment when Tamlin lunges for Feyre, and Elaine goes, and then Feyre winnows away. Because in my mind, she's bound and gagged, right? The Carver looks at Feyre and smiles. Why? What does it mean?
The Carver and the Serial are very similar, if not the same thing to me. They are two beings that want better in this world, and they know that Feyre and Rhys together are the ones to make the world a better place. I think the carver related more to Feyre and felt left out compared to his own brother and sister. The same with Feyre feeling different from her own sisters.
And I think the smile at the end is just like a thank you, which is sad.
Before we go into chapter 71, I want to point out that SJM uses 29 ellipses in only 7 pages. My soul hurts. That's a rate of 4 ellipses per page. Just going to leave that there. We may continue.
I think I've seen theories that the carver is not dead, and I bring this up because at the start of chapter 71, we learn that the tattoo on Feyre's back is gone. I think this clearly means he's dead. Note that Feyre hears, quote, silence in some pocket of my mind as a section of that two-pronged leash of control faded into darkness without end, leaving nothing behind. So again, I think he's dead. Unless he was able to, like, fulfill the bargain and escape, but I don't think that's the case.
He's a dead boy.
He's a dead boy. How many times have I read this quote and ignored it? SJM is clearly warning us what will happen if Rhys dies. Feyre hasn't even had the bargain with the carver for full 24 hours, and she's experiencing this loss and emptiness. I can't even imagine what the emptiness will be like with Rhys if this is how she's feeling with the carver. Regardless of how you feel about the carver, I want to read a passage that I think is really fucking poetic about his death. Quote, I wondered who would carve his death in the prison, if he had perhaps already carved it for himself on the walls of that cell, if he had wanted to make sure I was worthy not to taunt me, but because he wanted his end to be worth carving. It's just beautiful.
I love the idea of worthiness and Feyre realizing that the carver was trying to figure out if she was worthy of his sacrifice. Quote, if he had wanted to make sure I was worthy, not to taunt, but because he wanted his end to be worthy of carving. 2 points that I'm going to make. The first being that Feyre doesn't question her worthiness. Think back to Mist and Fury, where she was struggling with survivor's guilt and thinking that she doesn't deserve to live. Now, she's not questioning whether she's worthy, and it's not in a cocky way, but an understanding that she worked for it with the Ouroboros. Feyre has come to understand that her goal of winning the war is bigger than herself and her desire to save others. In many ways, I would say Feyre has a better understanding of what it means to be a High Lady rather than Rhys in what it means to be a High Lord, at this point at least.
I agree, because it's more than about sacrificing.
Well, yeah, Feyre is willing to let the bone carver die.
Right.
And not hold her back.
Right. Unlike Rhys, who's not willing to let his friends die.
Yeah.
But if it's for the greater good, maybe he should.
Maybe he should. What are we? I hope you and I are never faced with a greater good situation.
Yeah, seriously. Because we'll be like,
all right, well, greater good. Now for my second point. The way the carver goes out with a smile and a comfort in knowing that he's dying on his terms. What does that remind you of? Rhys in just a few chapters. There's a great moment when Nesta lets Cassian pull her into a sitting position to scan her face. Quote, devastation and rage laid in his own face. Did he know that she screamed for him knowing he'd come? That she'd done it to save him? This is so tragic knowing that Nesta is about to risk his life to kill the King of Hybern. And all the groundwork, everything that's happening right now is just adding the complexity of what we're going to see in Silver Flames.
As the inner circle regroup, trying to figure out what to do next, Amren holds Elaine, quote, as she vomited in the grass, not from the cauldron, but pure terror. Elaine's humanity is showing here by her vomiting, despite her bravery back at the Hybern camp. This is very reminiscent of Feyre in Thorns and Roses, and only emphasizes Elaine's remaining ties to humans, since she also sobbed at the sight of Grayson's banner. She's not like them right now. She's not Faye, and I think that is going to get her pushed aside throughout this sequence, which is very, very important for us to talk about, and we'll get to it in a bit. Hybern's armada of ships show up to reinforce the troops on the ground, and at this point, everyone knows they're doomed. Rhys says to Feyre down the bond, quote, I want you to run. I don't care what it costs. You run, get far away, and live to fight another day. You don't look back. Feyre responds, you said no goodbyes. Just another tragic clue from SJM that things are not looking good for Rhys, and that we're going to cry before we feel any sort of relief. And as they all start to separate, Feyre thinks, quote, "This was it, the last moments, the last time I would see them all." And there are clues that this isn't going to be the case, but SGM's laying it on real thick right now.
I wonder if Rhys is telling Asriel and Cassian and Mor the same thing. Not to save themselves, but to save Feyre. Or is this message really just for Feyre? Again, we're getting a lot of false goodbyes. This is to trick us for when we get to the real one. But Feyre is not having any of it. Feyre will go down with her mate, will die with him, and give everything. Except, not really, but she wants to. That's the goal. What does that remind you of? Nesta and Cassian, as we're going to see in just a bit. And that's just another clue that Nesta and Cassian are mates, since they want to go out together. I wonder if Elaine is wondering where Lucien is. I wonder if she's looking out to the sea, looking for him. I'm sure she feels him through the bond. But we're never going to know, because they straight up leave Elaine on the ground while they go to the sky to see what's going on. I bet when we get Elaine's book, there's going to be a flashback to this scene.
Oh, I'm sure there is.
I wonder if that's going to be the prologue. Because I think it would be great to kind of see like where she was with this and everything and see if she was affected. I don't know. SJM, you can take it because she's listening to this clearly. You can take my idea. Also, I love that when Rhys goes to the sky, he just grabs Feyre. Like, it's described like his head jerked to me. He grabbed my waist and hauled me to the sky. And
It's hot.
I don't have anything to say about it other than it does something to me.
It's hot.
It is. It is. And then Nesta demands Cassian to take her to the sky as well. Like, that's the kind of initiative we like to see Elaine. I don't know why I'm blaming her.
There's no other Illyrians to take her to the sky.
She bat her eyes and then Illyrian flies over.
Despite all the sadness and the goodbyes and the belief that the end is here, we as readers are meant to hope, to believe that all of this isn't true, that inevitable death. Why is that? Let's talk about the use of the horn. The first horn brought Tamlin, Beren, Jurian, and Grayson and their respective armies. The second horn brought Hybern's reinforcements. That's surely it, but psych, it's not. The third horn, quote, lifted in perfect, mighty harmony, is the sound of triumph because there is power in threes. This time, Miriam and Draken and a human army can be seen arriving. This is where Rhys grabs Feyre and goes to the sky, and then Cassian brings Nesta.
Yeah, it's almost like a meeting of mates. Like, Draken's there talking about Miriam, and then Rhys. It's like a weird...
Mates-only club.
Yeah, like, not a double date, but like, you know...
Triple date.
Triple date, yeah.
Group date. We know that this is the tides turning because Draken's wings, quote, were almost blindingly bright in the sun. That good old sun is coming back in to remind us that victory will be had today.
While talking to Draken, who's in the sun, Rhys has tears in his eyes, which can be viewed as hope blinding him, hope for the help that they've received. Also, Draken mentions that 300 years ago, they had to hide to save themselves from troubles at their shore. Quote, 3 centuries ago, we had some troubles on our borders tied to, you know. No, I don't. I don't know. Do you know?
I don't. Unless it's you know who.
Voldemort?
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going. We then learn who's accompanying Miriam and Draken. It's Vassa, Lucien, and Papa Archeron. Feyre has faith that it's Lucien, and she says as much, that Lucien had found Vassa. And that's a huge shift from earlier in this novel, that Feyre's capable of thinking of this and trusting in Lucien, because that is not how she viewed Lucien when she was at the Spring Court. However, it's actually Papa Archeron who found Vassa and brought the human armies, and Nesta somehow senses that, which we'll talk about in a bit. This strikes me as a huge parallel to Thorns and Roses, when the Puka convinced Feyre it was her father who came to rescue her. Except now it's actually true.
It only took 3 books.
Third time's a charm, I guess?
Yeah. Feyre is very quick to romanticize her father. Her language describing him and his actions really play him up. She talks about him being there for his daughters that he was never there for, and just showing up, and like, good for him for doing the bare minimum and finally showing up. You and I get into it in a bit. You can tell Feyre has forgiven Papa Archeron pretty quickly. She doesn't struggle with his arrival versus Nesta, whose response is, quote, what? Nesta said sharply, not even a question. We can tell Nesta's struggling from the get-go.
Yep. So let's talk about Papa Archeron. The slow reveal of Papa Artron is so expertly done. Your heart just swells as you read it, and I genuinely cried at this moment, and every time I've reread it, maybe because I felt like my dad never showed up growing up. You know, trauma. But what I really want to do is talk about the way SJM has written the character, not the moment. The moment was chef's kiss. The character is questionable. I came across a TikTok video a few months ago that really struck me about this moment that I wanted to discuss. At Zuzana, and that's Zuzana, on TikTok, posted a video about why Papa Artron infuriates her. And after listening to her points, I really agree and better understand Nesta's reaction to all of this in the future. What Papa Artron is doing here is a grand gesture, a symptom of performative narcissism. In rallying the humans in the name of helping his daughters, Papa Artron is doing this grand gesture for his own sake, to make himself feel important, rather than truly for the sake of Feyre, Nesta, and Elaine. Because if it was for his daughter's sake, Papa Artron would have done something other than carve wooden figurines when they were poor and starving. And we know Papa Artron is like this. Remember when Feyre came home from the spring court in Thorns and Roses? Papa Artron threw a ball in Feyre's honor, but it wasn't about Feyre. It was about his need to posture. And when Papa Artron realized the truth about Feyre being taken by Tamlin and her desire to go back to the spring court, Papa Artron hid from Feyre and never said goodbye. To Susanna's point, a grand gesture does not make up for years of neglect of his minor daughters. Not major daughters. Minor, under the age of 18.
Yeah, I was really confused when you read the notes. I was like, he has other more important daughters. I will say, it makes sense when you think about the way that Nesta and Feyre describes their mother as more in love with their father and than she was with her kids, who was more into partying and everything. Well, of course that would make sense with Papa Artron too. Like, they're married. Yeah. There's an attraction there.
They were very aligned. The two of them were very much in love. It does read like they're very much alike.
There's always situations where, like, you know, one partner's a narcissist and, you know, the other partner is just trying to survive. But that doesn't sound like the case here.
No, it sounds like Mother Artron fed into his narcissism.
It sounds like they really thrived off one another, because in book 1, Feyre even says that it was the fall that did it for him. Their fall from grace. Yep. Not even like their death of the mother fully did it. It was the not having money, all of that going down. And it's just like, I don't have sympathy for that. You know, a little reveal of my own personal life. My father died. My father? Wow. It's just like so formal. My dad died when I was 12. And it was like he was the main breadwinner. My mom and I suffered quite a bit. Like, we lost everything. And that woman finished college, put herself through all that, worked her ass off, and gave me a very good life. You know, like she stepped it up. And that woman, my mother, if she's listening to it, she'd be like, excuse me, what woman?
And for a second, I questioned if you were talking about yourself.
I stepped in at the age of 12. I mean, I did. But like, my mom worked her ass off to give me a better life after he passed. And that's not what he does here. He does not do that at all. And I love that you pointed out that he's a narcissist.
And I think Papa Artron dies because at the end of the day, despite whatever his intentions are, he's a shit father, and SJM knows it. And while no one deserves death, it would probably have been more disappointing for Nesta and her sisters for their father to have lived and to continue to disappoint them than to allow him this final grand gesture, this final act. That being said, Nesta's future anger at her father totally makes sense because, like Susanna says, it's about him and the performance that gets him the accolades. I mean, he fucking called himself the Prince of Merchants despite being broke, rather than about really truly being there for his daughters. Because mind you, Papa Artron has not seen Feyre or her sisters once since any of them were made into Fae. So what do we really know about how he feels about them? He doesn't even know that they're Fae.
I wonder if he does know, but I guess he doesn't.
He doesn't, because he realizes Nesta's Fae when the King of Hybern brings him over.
I thought it was more of like he took in, like it just says he took in her ears. You don't think Lucian told him?
Oh, I guess there's a chance.
Like, you know, I'm sure he was like, by the way, your daughter, the High Lady of the Night Court, sent me.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Like, I think when he observed it, it was more of like, oh, it's real. It's happening. Yeah. Like, you really are Fae.
That's fair. But I like to think.
Well, he doesn't know anything about them, though. Like, you're right. Like, you know, he can hear it from Lucian of how it went down, but like, he's not there. He hasn't seen them in forever.
Right. He's not really processing it.
No, he's too busy trying to be like, I'm a hero.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, I can't wait till like next episode when we talk about Vasa and be like, he was better to me than my own father. Shut up. Fuck you. Fuck you, Vasa. Even though it's not her fault. Then there's the fact that he rides on the Nesta ship. It just adds insult to injury.
Really, though. Why wasn't he on the Elaine ship?
On the Feyre ship.
I mean, Elaine is the only one who actually showed him any love.
Yeah, but he also knows Feyre is the High Lady of the Night Court.
In theory, yeah.
Yeah. It just, to me, it's like, you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. And it's like, I rode on the ship I named after you. Don't you forgive me now? It made up for all the years that I neglected you. What? Each of the daughters, Nesta, Feyre, and Elaine, have their own messed up relationship with their father, and it really reflects on who they choose to love. Let's look at Feyre. She didn't receive any affection from her father. They coexisted together, and Feyre's original dream is that she just wanted enough money for food for her and her dad and enough money to paint. Then she goes and falls for Tamlin, a man who gave her bare minimum affection and attention, who gave her basic needs. He housed her, he fed her, he gave her paints. That's all he really did for her. And Feyre fell for him. It wasn't until Rhys, a man who truly showed up for her, that she found a kind of love that was not like her father. Then we have Nesta, who hated her father and blamed him for everything. And she's not entirely wrong. He fucked up completely. He's not a great father. He was afraid of her. He didn't understand her, and he didn't take the time to understand her. So who does she end up with? An emotionally intelligent king. That is Cassian. Now for Elaine. In theory, she's closer to her father, and they doted on one another. There was a connection there. But let's remember what Amy just said. Papa Archeron is a narcissist. It comes back to him. It's about what serves him and his need. He wants to be the doting father and have the loving daughter. He needs that. Who does Elaine start crushing on? Daddy Azzy, who we've already discussed to be a narcissist. He looks for women who reflects his own desire to be the savior rather than what they need.
I'm going to take that one step further. I feel like Grayson fits this bill as well. That they doted on each other until it no longer served Grayson.
Yeah.
It no longer served what his needs were. And so Elaine has to break that trauma cycle.
I mean, talk about breaking the trauma cycle with like a guy like Lucian who's like, okay, well then I'm going to give you space. Right? It's like you have Azriel who's like,
let me carry you when you can actually walk.
Yeah, like I'm gonna be your hero, I'm gonna be your savior, I'm gonna be everything. Now you be the person who needs me, please need me. Versus Lucian's like, all right, you have wishes, I respect that. I'm gonna come and hope that you'll still see me.
Otherwise, I'll peace out.
Yeah.
I still don't ship them, but I understand.
One of my favorite things that someone, I think Happy Hermit said, Lily, was she doesn't think about the romance because she just has faith that SJM will take care of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. SJM is always going to make us fall in love with whomever she wants us to fall in love with.
Yeah.
Because that's the kind of writer she is.
Yeah. And, you know, I feel like there's a lot of clues that it's Elaine and Lucian, but if it ends up being Elaine and Azriel, she's going to make me trust it.
Yeah. At the start of chapter 72, Feyre observes that, quote, the wind whipped away the tears rolling down Nesta's face at the sight of our father's ships, at the sight of the ship he'd chosen to sail into battle, for the daughter who had hated him for not fighting for us, who had hated him for our mother dying, for the poverty and the despair and the years lost. I think it's our instinct as readers to assume that this is a moment of joy and love, that the tears are in gratitude or something positive. I really wonder if that's the case. Feyre's observation may or may not project that, though. It's actually kind of neutral when you think about it, though it could read it as positive. But you can also read this moment as Nesta's tears are of anger and rage, if you want. The wind doesn't kiss Nesta's face like all the winds in the spring court kissed Feyre's cheeks. It's negative and violent. It whipped them away.
Yeah, it's so violent. Like, I don't want wind whipping me. It whips the tears away. That's
I want my tears to be licked away.
I was about to say the same thing. Lick my tears away. I agree. The fact that Nesta's not wiping the tears away herself, that the wind is the one that's clearing her face, is significant. I feel like it almost makes the tears not real, as if Nesta's able to hide the fact that she's crying, because she's not touching them, so she doesn't actually have to own her own tears. Feyre is filling in a lot of blanks here. all by her own assumptions and guesses. Quote, had it become clear that we had been betrayed by our own kind, and had he then departed under such secrecy, he would not risk the messages to us falling into the wrong hands to find help? Feyre, stop making excuses for him. Feyre hasn't been this type of delusional and, okay, maybe not delusional, but she hasn't made these types of grand assumptions since Thorns and Roses and Tamlin. And again, her and Tamlin have a very similar relationship to her father and mother. Go back to season 1. But these are pretty big guesses, and it just proves what I was saying earlier. Feyre is much faster at forgiving her father than Nesta is.
And going back to your point, Papa Archeron, Mother Archeron had a relationship that reflects Feyre and Tamlin's, that also reflects Feyre's and her father's.
Mm-hmm.
Assumptions, complacency.
She never pushed her father.
Nope.
She just was like, all right, I guess I'll fill in the role.
Yep.
Just the same way that she never really pushed Tamlin until she needed to push him and he wasn't willing to be pushed. But like in Thorns and Roses, she never really pushed him.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When Rhys asks Draken about Vasa and her curse, the Firebird makes her appearance. Quote, fast as a shooting star, burning as hot and furious as the heart of a forge. We know SJM doesn't use her figurative language lightly. Sarah has been so intentional with images like the doe, the wolf, night and stars, and so many more throughout the series. So it's curious to me that things used to describe Rhys and Feyre, like the shooting star, as well as Nesta, the forge, are used to describe Vasa as well. Could she be a relative somehow? Maybe via Mother Archeron.
I like it. And I agree, there's a lot of clues happening here, and we're trying our best to make sense of them. The colors used to describe Vasa, quote, red and gold and white, vibrant as molten metal. Molten metal I always associate with Nesta for sure. The colors are interesting because there hasn't really been any character associated with those 3 colors specifically. I initially saw red and I got excited. I was like, Vasa and more are OTP. But like, let's be real, none of this will make sense until we get the next book.
And we are starving for it.
I am so hungry that I can't tell if it's for the book or because I need more food for breakfast. I don't know. Similar to Thorns and Roses, Rhys kisses Feyre's tears. Okay, sure, like in Thorns and Roses, he licks them away, but it's a callback, and let's just roll with it. Draken communicates through his mind to Miriam. Like, is he Damati? I feel like that wasn't established that all mates can communicate through their mind.
No, it's not.
Because we never see Cassian and Nesta do that. And we don't see anyone else really doing that.
We don't see Khalees and Vivian do it.
Yeah. So I'm like, are you Damati then? There's a lot of questions about Draken and Miriam that we're going to have here. Like this one. Rhys calls Miriam a witch. Did we know that she was a witch?
Nope.
Like, she's half fae and half human.
Yep.
But I don't know. And to me, this is going to be for Nesta. And again, Silver Flames. I think she's going to be a witch.
To back up your point, this is said in passing. Just like it was explained what a witch was in passing to Nesta back at the Illyrian camp back in the, 60s or whatever chapters it was.
The 1960s.
Anyway, it's got to be a clue for something and we just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah, Nessa's a witch. You heard it here first, folks.
And I bet Miriam is a witch using power from whatever trove item is on Crtea.
Because that's the main thing of a witch, is that they pull power from objects that's not natural to them.
And spoiler for SJM verse, I bet Bryce has to go to Miriam for help to get back to Lunathian.
You know what Bryce has on her back?
A horn.
She's a witch. She has the potential of being a witch.
Oh, she sure does.
Yeah. We did thoughts.
We did thoughts. Feyre decides that the time is right for her and Amryn to go to the cauldron, but Nesta rightly says that the King of Hybern will still be by its side and he needs to be distracted. Nesta offers herself as bait along with Cassian as her protector. I want to note that Rhys is willing to hear Nesta out about her plan of being bait until Cassian is involved. And I find it curious that no one calls him out for his double standard, that he's willing to let Nesta go be bait and potentially die, but not Cassian.
I know, the conversation, if you review it only as a subtext, is, I'm willing to die for you, sister, and for this cause. And Rhys is like, that is so noble of you. And Cassian, fuck you, bitch.
Yeah, pretty much.
Don't you dare bring him into this, my beautiful boy.
It's true.
Don't you dare. I think this is the very reason that Rhys will treat Nesta like shit in Silver Flames. And again, just think a little bit about what comes in Silver Flames. Nesta's not great, I will give her that, but he goes way too hard on her.
He's so harsh.
I still get mad at the fact that he rages as hard as he does because Nesta told Feyre the truth.
Yeah, this is where all the evil Rhys theories stem from. But honestly, we're seeing proof that
he's mad.
He's mad at her.
Absolutely. And he has very little patience. And I think that the fact that Nesta is willing to put his friend in danger after saving him, like, talk about the whiplash of emotions that Rhys is experiencing. It's like, I'm so mad at you, but you saved him. Wait, now you're risking him?
Mm-hmm.
I thought we were on the same page here.
Yeah.
And when Nesta snorts in his face and reminds Rhys that he is not her High Lord, it just bruises his ego. And then Cassian chooses Nesta over Rhys in this moment, even though Cassian would do it to help Rhys regardless. But again, he's pro Nesta's idea.
Right. I mean, Rhys is just getting bitch slapped over and over again right now.
He really needs to be, physically and verbally and mentally and emotionally.
He does. At least Cassian's willing to call out Rhys for his self-sacrificing shit. And it's been a long time coming. We saw Cassian talk about it with Feyre when they trained together earlier in the novel. We also saw Cassian and Rhys fight about Rhys's sacrificing nature after Cassian was injured in the first battle. So it makes sense that here, when it matters most, Cassian delivers a sucker punch to the gut to get his way. And I love that he uses 3 different arguments against Rhys, and Rhys rejects all of them, which is why Cassian ultimately is like, fuck you, Nesta, let's go.
Yeah, I'm going.
Quote, "You gave everything, Rhys. You went through that hell for us for 50 years. Let us return the favor. Let us repay the debt. I never got to repay your mother for her kindness. Let me do it this way. Let me buy you time. Save some of the glory for the rest of us." Poor Cassian is so fed up.
Like, I need excuses.
Yeah.
And then Cassian calls Rhys out on what he sacrificed. Although they never use the exact words, me as a writer goes for the most amount of pain possible. I feel like I would have had Cassian be a little bit more direct, saying like, I knew what she did to you. But Cassian is a better human being than me, except he's not human and he's not real.
As Cassian speaks, quote, "Sunlight glints off that dark winged helmet, hinting at victory, despite the fact that everyone's convinced it's the end." And that's just ironic.
You can also say that this is Cassian glowing with the truth, that he is in the right here, that he's making the right decision. Rhys knows Cassian is going off to his death, and it almost makes Cassian angelic in a way with the light shining on him.
He's an angel to me.
He is our sweet baby angel boy.
Feyre tries to comfort Rhys by saying Cassian might survive. Rhys says Cassian won't, and I wonder if that's because he remembers what Elaine said back in Valaris about how it won't take much to kill Cassian.
Again, this just shows how much Rhys is going to resent Nesta like he says it. No, he's not going to survive.
And he blames Nesta.
He blames Nesta.
There's a moment, mentioned in passing, that Feyre makes Rhys take Elaine far away before he goes off to battle, and before Feyre and Amren go toward the cauldron. And I feel like this is just another example of Elaine getting overlooked and overprotected, which is ironic when you know what comes next.
Elaine keeps being an afterthought in this chapter, when she throws up, when they leave her on the ground while they fly off to talk to Draken. And it's ironic considering what she does, but it's going to be very much a realization that everyone else has a purpose but her. I wonder if that's going to hit her later, like, wow, they're leaving me behind because kind of suck. I don't really do anything here. I think that's going to be part of her struggle also later on. Who knows? Maybe Elaine went to Nesta and Cassian because she had a vision. I mean, if you think about it, Rhys dropped her on the opposite side. How did she know where Cassian and Nesta were? How did she know to go there? And she must have hustled her little butt off to get there.
Yeah, honestly, she might not have even had a new vision. She might have remembered the original vision and said, oh, wow, this all looks really familiar.
Maybe I can change it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Again, it's not talked about, but I think it's heavily implied that Elaine went there knowing.
Yep, I agree. When Amren and Feyre take off, Amren tells Feyre to not look back. So, I didn't. Feel familiar? Remember the ravens? Feyre was told to not look back when Rhys went to fight the ravens and Bryaxis. But she did anyway. This time, Feyre does not. It's another Sodom and Gomorrah reference if you think about the Hebrew Bible.
Or Orpheus, the Greek mythology.
Absolutely. It shows up a lot of places. look at Feyre's growth. This time, a whole novel later, Feyre listens, despite the fact that the people she loves are all going and dying, and she may never see them again. I just really have to take a moment to appreciate SGM for bringing in this parallel. She didn't have to. Something about it is really poetic, it rhymes, and I just love it and I appreciate it so much.
What's the part that rhymes?
So that's actually a reference to a George Lucas quote about how it doesn't actually rhyme, but it's parallels or the idea of repetition. It rhymes. Like the moment rhymes.
Yeah, I just don't appreciate George Lucas for using that word. It doesn't rhyme. I see what you're saying.
It's a parallel.
It's a parallel. I'm happy I asked because when you said it, I was like, uh-huh. And then I went back. I'm like, I don't know what part rhymes.
Yeah, it's the idea of moments rhyming with each other.
Okay. Doesn't actually rhyme.
Doesn't actually rhyme.
I'm like, I don't know if you know what rhyme. Don't look back. So I didn't. That doesn't rhyme, Amy. I don't know if you understand what rhyming means.
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Move your career further, faster in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu/Spotify.
Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No, don't. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Another marker of how far we've come. At the start of Chapter 73, Striga has paved a road of blood and bodies for Amren and Feyre to follow toward the cauldron. Where once Feyre had gone to Striga and faced the beautiful, ugly creature with the threat of death, Striga is instead Feyre's guide. There's something eerily familiar about Striga here. We've said over and over that Feyre and the Weaver are similar. So when Striga, quote, a beautiful, dark-haired young woman, smiles with her bloody mouth at Feyre, it reminds me a lot of Feyre and her savage smile at Rhys not too long ago.
There's a lot of references of hunger and being full, while we have Striga, who is full with death to the point that it makes her blindingly beautiful. We have Amren, who's described as being hungry for the spells and the wards the king set up leading to the cauldron. I think it's meant to show a juxtaposition between survival and hunger. Right now, it's about surviving, not thriving. Striga is thriving, and that has no place in the battlefield. It's gluttonous and shameful. While Amren is the right type of hungry, right? Like hungry for victory, hungry to get through. As Feyre is running by the Hybern commanders, she hears all sorts of horrible things that they're saying. Like they want to kill the inner circle and the high lords and assaulting women. And they're calling dibs on who gets to kill which high lord and stuff. And if I was Feyre, I'd be mildly insulted. Be like, I don't hear you calling my name on which one to kill.
I'm a threat too.
Yeah, it just would be whispering and and Feyre, she's so dangerous. What? Also, the descriptions of Vivian fighting with the polar bears. I don't know if anyone remembers the 1991 classic, The Polar Bear King, but that's what it reminds me of.
I have not seen it.
I think you said it also reminds you of The Golden Compass.
It reminds me of The Golden Compass.
Yeah, probably a more accurate description.
We see sex and death coupled together again in the Weaver's final moments. The King of Hybern approaches the Weaver and tells her she's beautiful, magnificent, quote, his voice a seductive croon. And then he snaps her neck, bastard. Don't couple words of affirmation with violence.
It's just rude, unless I'm asking for it in a sexy way. Unless you say good girl and then do other things. Anyway, in another world, I feel like Hybern and Striga would be OTP. And I have received a lot of questions what OTP means. It means one true pairing. Yep. So we ship them. What does ship mean? It means we support them as a couple.
We like them as a relationship.
Yeah. I think that Striga and Hybern would have made a beautiful couple in another world.
In another violent world.
Yeah. I want to quickly talk about Striga's death and the way that she dies. I know that technically the king doesn't kill her, right? He just snaps her neck and then she's ripped apart by the hounds. But I kind of struggle with her death a little bit. It feels like the bone carver, a death god, went out the right way, right? He died the way that it takes to kill a death god with the cauldron. Striga was shredded apart, which I guess it counts. I don't know. It's always kind of sat a little weird with me. I know it's SJM showing how strong the king is, that he could just snap her neck and feed her to the dogs. But it just makes me feel like, is there another way that she could live? I don't know. I mean, she'd have to survive being pooped out. So
there's that.
There's that.
I do think about this in terms of writing. There's a lot of significant death that happens in this sequence.
Yeah.
And Striga's is the only one that's insignificant.
Which is done on purpose. Because she's not good.
Right. Just like the King of Hybern does the same thing to Papa Archeron.
And that's kind of how death works, right? There's significant and there's insignificant.
Right. And I think to some extent it's SJM trying to balance out all the death.
Yeah, that's fair. Every single one can't be the bone carver, the cauldron wiped them out type thing.
Right. And they smiled as they vanish.
It needs to have the moments of there's a reason why Hybern kills Papa Archeron and Striga the same way. They are an afterthought to him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Amren. We haven't really discussed her actions so far this episode over the course of the last few chapters because they're small. They're kind of hard to decipher. At one point, she tells Feyre and her sisters to be as quick as shadows. And I wanted to read it into it, but I didn't. However, in this chapter, Amren's actions are important. So let's talk about them. Before the King of Hybern approaches Striga, Amren, quote, slammed Feyre face first into the stone. This always read as really overtly violent to me and made me think that Amren was trying to knock out Feyre. But Amren's not knocking out Feyre, she's trying to hide Feyre from being caught. But I genuinely think that this moment was written the way it was as a warning flag, a feint before the real act of betrayal.
Watch, there's a patch of grass right next to the stone.
Yeah, you could have just...
what the hell, Amren? There's a patch of cushioned moss right there that you could have thrown me face first. You could have thrown me shoulder first.
Right, exactly.
There's a lot of options. I think it just shows how close Amren is to losing it. She's getting aggressive. She knows how close they are and how desperate that she needs to break free. This is Amren losing her cool. I appreciate how we lose our cool. A lot of tears involved. Food is involved. Luckily, neither of us shove each other face first into stone when we lose our cool.
Although sometimes you have a desire to throw things at me.
That's only when I'm happy.
You could call that losing your cool.
Yeah, that's true, but in a good way. I only get violent when I'm expressing great joy.
There's also this moment when Nesta is rallying her power. Feyre can't move, and Amren tells Feyre to make it count, quote, and that was true grief shining in her eyes. She knew what was about to happen. Now, this is definitely Feyre misinterpreting, if not projecting, onto Amren. Is Amren truly sad for Nesta's sacrifice? Or does Amren feel guilt for the betrayal she knows she's about to commit? We'll never know.
We'll never know. The Ouroboros, which represented Feyre's darkest self, and having to accept that self, is now what grounds Feyre. While the cauldron sucks Feyre in and she starts to lose herself, she thinks of the Ouroboros, quote, I clung to every reflection and memory I had faced and owned, the good and the wicked and gray, who I was, who I was, who I was. It's a true acceptance of self.
It's a beautiful moment when you think about it.
Yeah.
And then there's the betrayal. Feyre has her hand on the cauldron. She's struggling to keep a hold of herself. And then Amren just stares at her and kicks the Book of Breathings away. Your stomach just drops, or at least mine did. Were we supposed to know? Did we catch Amren's betrayal before it happened? Honestly, I think it's the biggest plot twist ever.
It is such a great plot twist. I did not catch it. I was like confused. And it's also like, you know, in hindsight, was it much of a betrayal? Kind of, but like not really, because she saved everyone, and that was the whole point.
Right.
But like it is a betrayal, but it wasn't, which makes it like such a good plot twist because you're confused. It's not a good old fashioned, you know, I'm the bad guy now.
Right.
It's like, now I'm bad, but I saved you. And it was a great moment of like, I don't know what's happening. Where are you?
Right. And Feyre, classic Feyre, makes so many assumptions, and she's like, I've been betrayed. I'm going to kill her. No, bitch,
Yeah.
she just is going to do the thing that helps you win the war. It's fine.
She's about to sacrifice herself. Pull it together.
Attached to the cauldron, Feyre's consciousness splits, half of it going with the cauldron as it searches for Nesta in chapter 74. Do we believe it, or is it a convenient storytelling device?
Both. I believe it, but both. Like, okay, it makes sense that the cauldron would go after Nesta.
Right.
It's just one of those things where it's like, did Feyre give the cauldron permission to go because she's attached to her sister? Or did she get there right in the nick of time, you know, to go with the ride? Like, if she had grabbed the cauldron a few seconds later, would it be mid-flight? I don't know. I don't struggle with it. I think SJM weaves it very well together, nicely. Like, we've proven the cauldron will go look for Nesta.
Right.
When we were getting ready to read this, I was trying to remember. I'm like, was Feyre in the area? Oh, right. This is how she views it. So what are your thoughts on this?
I have mixed feelings. Sometimes I think it's a convenient storytelling device, but I'm trying to be SJM's hype woman. And when I think about it, and later on I'm going to make comparisons to Under the Mountain, when Feyre dies, her consciousness is floating around. So we know that Feyre's consciousness is capable of going, right? And she has her Daemati powers that can like look into Lucian's mind, etc. To what extent is it a combination of the cauldron and Feyre's abilities merging? I'm just trying to think about the believability, the plausibility.
I get it. Well, I don't think it requires too much Daemati. It's just her like being in sync with the cauldron.
Yeah.
And if the cauldron decided to go, I don't know, like look at Lucian, it would have go with him. But
I have another thought.
Okay.
This is more realistic.
Okay.
Later on, Feyre and Rhys are going to say that Feyre is a conduit for the cauldron.
Yeah.
And I think that this kind of supports that.
Yes.
Because, like you said, Feyre is in sync with the cauldron now. And for her to reform the cauldron and be a conduit, this has to also be believable.
Yeah, that's almost like this is the thing that
makes us believe.
Yeah, because Amren says, like, I had a feeling you'd be enough.
Yeah.
Which, hey, on a hope and a prayer and a feeling, I need a little bit more than that for you to have tested this.
It's true.
But, like, this was almost like the test of, because remember the last time she had the book, right? It was like she lost herself.
Yeah.
And it was like, this was the final, like, okay, can you do this again? Can you, it's coming back to the last book, the Mist and Fury, and how that ended. And yeah, so it's like, it makes sense. But also, like, isn't that good writing where things just kind of happen conveniently?
Yeah. But you go along with it because you're like, yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's storytelling is like, you need things to happen in a way, but I think all of it's believable on how we got here.
As Feyre and the cauldron pass over the battlefield, we see Azriel, whose wings are dragging on the ground. Remember, he's the one who told Feyre to not drag her wings earlier in the novel, that this is a sign of weakness among the Illyrians. Not only that, Azriel's wings are barely healed from saving Elaine from Hybern's camp. He's really, really weak right now, creating a sense of dread in us as readers.
Just imagining Feyre flying through the battlefield, I'd be like, hypocrite! When Feyre sees Rhys, she describes him as blood-splattered and fighting beautifully. There's a beauty in this violence and the life that pulses through him. When Rhys starts to change into his beast form, what's the first part of him that changes? That's right, his talons. His nasty-ass talon toes. It says his fingers and feet turned first.
I did write Talon Toes in my book.
Talon, nasty ass toes.
They make an appearance in every book.
Yeah. Even later on, we don't describe it, but when he sees Feyre, he isn't completely transformed back.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, like, she says his teeth and his fingers were still elongated. And I'm like, and so were his toes. If we note the descriptors of the beast, it has dark scales similar to Feyre's beast.
Rhys fully morphs into his beast form, that beast within that he always tries to keep hidden. We learn here that he looks like the beasts in the carving in the Court of Nightmares. And Helion matches Rhys's energy with the daytime equivalent, which just makes me think of Feyre's inner monster all over again.
Will Lucian be able to transform into this one day when he becomes High Lord?
Who knows?
Who knows? When Feyre and the Cauldron make it to Nesta and Cassian, Feyre realizes that Nesta was laying a trap for Hybern, that she had every intention to kill Hybern. Even the Cauldron, quote, coiled and reeled back at Nesta's power. It sees how powerful she is, and she's like ready to go. Nesta is described as having her eyes blaze with an unholy fire, as if Feyre realizes just how unnatural Nesta's power is. And Feyre really appreciates just how much Nesta has been holding back. Quote, she'll kill the King of Hybern. Like, yeah, she will. Which is why the King of Hybern went to go get Papa Archeron, because he expected this.
Somehow, Feyre and the Cauldron make it to Nesta and Cassian before the King of Hybern, even though the King of Hybern left first. And one wonders, how is that possible? Well, as Jac mentions, the King of Hybern made a pit stop to grab Papa Archeron to use him as a human shield because he fully expected Nesta to try and kill him. Feyre immediately begs for the Cauldron to save her father, and later she'll offer her own soul in bargain to save him. She's not one to shy from a good bargain. This entire novel, and honestly the series, has shown her desperation to save the ones she loves by making reckless bargains. She's been doing it since Thorns and Roses. So we're definitely not surprised by her actions here.
This is the first time for Feyre that she hasn't been able to bargain herself out of something. It's one of those things that SJM has prepared us for book after book, that when Feyre tries to make a bargain, she does, and it saves her life. Now, Feyre is getting denied, and we are meant to feel as helpless as she is.
Nesta hesitates to kill the King of Hybern here because despite her anger and hatred of her father, she can't kill him. And for Papa Archeron to say, quote, I loved you from the first moment I held you in my arms. I'm so sorry, Nesta. My Nesta, I'm so sorry for it all. Honestly, if he really loved her, he should have said, kill me. He's just causing Nesta, more trauma because at the end of the day, it's about what he needs and not what Nesta needs.
Yeah, he's too busy begging for forgiveness and understanding. Like, I get it.
This is not the moment.
Right? Like, say one sorry, like, I'm so sorry. Do it. Yeah. Like, And then it's the, like, my Nesta. She's not your anything. You gave up the title of father the day you stopped being their caretaker. It's so selfish.
Mm-hmm.
While we see Feyre freaking out, begging the Cauldron, we see Nesta being a lot more calm. Granted, she's still worried, but she only says please, not really begging and bargaining.
She says please just like Feyre used to say please in Mist and Fury.
Oh, yeah.
She's not someone to say please because she's a proud person,
which
means a lot.
Yeah, it means a lot. And I don't think that she says it the way that Feyre has said it, because I'm not entirely sure she means it. And here's why I say that. Because when the king asks Nesta, will she give back what she took? And she says yes. I think that Nesta was setting up the king for an attack. She just needed her father to be out of the way. I don't think Nesta had any intention of giving up. I think the fact that Nesta does this tactic in just a few moments goes to support my theory. It's like, please move him. I'll give you back anything you want. Goodbow.
Kamehameha!
Yeah, did you see how I went Spider-Man with my hands?
I did.
I'm like, what?
Also, it's half of Kamehameha.
Yes, which is Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
If anyone's, are you impressed that I...
No, I knew you knew Dragon Ball Z.
It's Randall who gets impressed when I remember Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
And then Spider-Man and a little bit of Sailor Moon.
All together now.
Let's all bring it in. I think that's part of the reason. Well, we know why Nesta beats herself up, because she didn't do anything for her father. And that could be like she didn't move fast enough. She didn't attack first. She didn't do all those things. She was just kind of like trying to plan it all out in her head.
It doesn't work out for Papa Artron. And honestly, I think it's his bravado that gets him killed. Instead of keeping his damn mouth shut, when Nesta says she'll give the King of Hybern what he wants, Papa Artron has to go spout, "Don't you lay your filthy hands on my daughter!" And then his neck gets snapped.
I think you and I were talking about during prep of like Cassian in the background be like, "I love your daughter. Can I get permission real quick to marry her? Okay, thanks, bye.
I need your blessing.
Blessing, please."
I honestly love the moment of Papa Artron's death, not because I want him dead, although I kind of do, but because of the way it's written. It's reminiscent of the serial's death for me. Quote, "I heard the crack before I realized what happened. Just like the feeling of the blood splatter before realizing that the wood was an arrow in the serial's throat. It's fabulous. Just like everything else Feyre is experiencing. She's experiencing things in the moment. That doesn't mean she understands what's happening in the moment."
Yep. While Feyre is losing it, Nesta doesn't react, and I wonder how much of it is shock and how much she's trying to let the king get a reaction out of her, right? Like, if she starts screaming and freaking out, the king's going to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, it says her power flickers out, so I don't know how much control she really has over herself, but I like to think that she's more of a strategist.
Then she realizes.
Yeah. It's like she's not screaming. She's like, all right, I feel a little dead inside, but I'll rally.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about the parallel to Thorns and Roses in this scene. Papa Artron's neck snaps, just like Feyre's did in Thorns and Roses. And there's a lot of similar placement here when you think back to Under the Mountain in Thorns and Roses. Feyre watches like a disembodied soul, just like she did Under the Mountain, barely hanging on after her death. Cassian and Nesta take turns fighting the King of Hybern, the way Tamlin went after Amarantha. And Nesta is filled with power in her rage, just like Tamlin regained his powers after Feyre's death.
While it does spur her on, Nesta really doesn't pull herself together until Cassian gets hurt. When she hears his scream, that's when she's like, not my man.
Yeah, which makes me think of Rhys. At the end, which I'll talk about later, Elaine stabs the King of Hybern in the throat, just like Tamlin ripped out Amarantha's throat before he killed her. So lots of little parallels here.
Yeah, it's all paralleling. The cauldron doesn't let Feyre go. She wants to get back to her body so she can go help, but it keeps her there. And we know it has some base level of consciousness, of understanding, because of how it reacts to Nesta and especially with Elaine. But why does the cauldron need Feyre there? Why won't it let her go?
I think it goes back to the conversation of Feyre being a conduit. Right now, she's just so aligned with the cauldron that they can't separate.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Despite all of Nesta's anger that gets explored in Silver Flames, and that we've seen glimpses of here, we cannot deny that Nesta loves her father. She closes his eyes and kisses his brow before turning on the King of Hybern. At this point, Cassian's on the ground, wings snapped, bone jutting from his thigh, and I wonder if this is the scene Elaine saw in her visions of him.
100%. Or actually, I think I wrote 1,000,000%. Remember, Elaine is rushing over here right now to stop that vision.
If you doubted Nesta and Cassian were mates, this moment is so telling. Hybern continues to cause Cassian physical pain, and when Nesta looks at Cassian, she, quote, angles her head, the movement not human, not Fae, purely animal, purely predator. And when her eyes lifted to the king again, "I'm going to kill you." Because they're mates and they're in love.
Yeah.
And the King of Hybern, the sleazeball that he is, has to be gross and overtly sexual with his suggestion that he, quote, can think of far more interesting things to do with you. Totally negating Nesta as a threat, which is so like him, but also disgusting.
Absolutely disgusting. I, for one, was not curious at all.
I wasn't either.
I was.
I know. It registered after I said I wasn't either.
Yeah. It's only because I keep picturing Patrick Dempsey. Like, that's my problem, is after our casting, I just imagine Patrick Dempsey just saying, I can imagine far more interesting things to do with you.
Or Antonio Banderas.
Yeah. Like, okay, he's evil, nasty. He's not talking about consent. Okay, I get it. But like, Patrick Dempsey... Also, I totally forgot about Nesta killing a bunch of Fae. Quote, her power blasted the tree behind him to cinders, blasted across the battlefield in a low arc, then landed right in the Hybern ranks, taking out hundreds before they knew what happened. The first time Feyre killed, she really struggled with that. Granted, they were all innocents, but Nesta just massacred an entire section of an army. And that's really the last we're going to hear of that. Like, Nesta's like, all right, I'm all done. That's fine. I won't take that one to my grave. I'm going to let that go right here, right now. We shouldn't be surprised because she takes Cassian's blade and lures the king right away from Cassian to sneak attack. Like, she is out for blood. The silver flames foreshadowing, it just gives me chills. Like, keep in mind, for some reason, I always imagine her in her dress, but she's wearing Illyrian leathers right now. She's fighting for Cassian with Cassian's blade, and all these moments of just like, she never trained, she wasn't ready for this.
I think of it too, and I also think of like, man, she probably wishes she had done some training.
Yeah.
And it's going to make training all the more important when we get to Silver Flames.
End of Silver Flames, Nesta probably thinks back like, I could have kicked his ass.
Yeah, she could have.
I mean, would she? Because like Cassian couldn't, but...
No, that's fair. But she would have had more of a fighting chance.
Yeah.
We then get to the part that really kills me in this novel. When Cassian is broken, bloody, and cannot move, and Nesta can't help him up, but refuses to leave him, he says to her, quote, I have no regret in my life, but this, that we did not have time, that I did not have time with you, Nesta. I will find you again in the next world, the next life, and we will have that time, I promise. How do you not cry? How do you not want to die? It makes me so sad.
Does it, Amy? Does it make you sad? Does it make you so sad that I record you crying?
Nope.
Does it make you sad that...
If it makes me sad, I hold it in so that you can't record me.
For any reference who missed it, I was crying at Rhys's death scene, and Amy found it so funny that she recorded me.
And put it on Instagram.
And laughed her ass off.
Yep.
And she's laughing right now at the memory, because I try to smile and be happy at the end, and my attempt of being brave is what makes you laugh the hardest. She's slamming her head down right now.
Going back to the quote, I feel that this supports my theory from season 2 that reincarnation is a thing in this universe. And yes, this whole quote is just romantic, but also reincarnation.
Reincarnation, 100%. When the king gets closer to them after Cassian's declaration, I want to just take a minute. That declaration, damn, get you a man that does that. The cauldron seems to be struggling. Quote, and even the cauldron seemed to pause in surprise of some feeling as Nesta looked at the king. As we're about to find out, the cauldron is very into Elaine, and for Nesta, it wants its power back. But what is the cauldron feeling when it watches Nesta trying to defend herself and Cassian? Because they're about to go out, and they're about to go out together. So what does it mean for the cauldron to be feeling something at this time?
I wonder to some extent if the cauldron is remembering its true purpose. If you think back to Thorns and Roses, prayers and fate are all tied to the cauldron.
Mm-hmm.
And what are mates but fate? And so to what extent are mates determined by the mother in the cauldron, right? Yeah. And so the cauldron's been in the evil clutches of Hybern for a while now. Is it now remembering that maybe it's the one that helped determine that Nesta and Cassian were mates?
I love that. I really, really love that, because even though they were mate-ish while she was human, the same way that Feyre and Rhys were mate-ish, it becomes much more solidified once they become Fae. And that couldn't have happened without the cauldron.
Right. And so I think the cauldron is this weird, creepy thing, but we have to remember that it's also...
It gives life.
It gives life. It gave magic along with the help of the mother. And so it's tied to all of these interworkings, and I think it's forgotten that.
Yeah, I love it.
We think Nesta and Cassian are going to die, but then they don't, because Elaine, the forgotten, pushed aside middle sister, quote, stepped out of a shadow and rammed Truth Teller to the hilt through the back of the king's neck as she snarled in his ear, "Don't you touch my sister." Earlier I mentioned how the whole killing of Hybern was giving me Tamlin energy, but right now it's also very, very Daddy Azzy. Not only is Elaine wielding Truth Teller, Azriel's knife, she also steps out of a shadow. Gone is the light and golden references, and here's the darkness, because Elaine has it in her.
I struggled from the beginning of this. Like, she basically killed the king, but she doesn't get the credit because she didn't saw his head off.
Right.
Because he doesn't die instantly. He's gargling and stuff. But What will also be interesting is in the next episode, Elaine's super light and airy about the whole thing and isn't really traumatized about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know about her. I don't know. We'll see how she turns out.
I think the act of Elaine and Nesta both taking their turn to help kill the King of Hybern, and the fact that Elaine's not perturbed by her act, shows the strength of the bond between Nesta and Elaine.
Yeah.
That even though they're going to fight and they're going to grow distant over the course of Silver Flames, there's a lot of love there. And at the end of the day, Elaine did what she thought was best.
Yeah, it's like the big sister was like, don't worry, I'll take the trauma.
Yeah.
I've seen that in several of my romance books where like the main female character will shoot someone and she's like, oh my God, I killed them. And then the main male character is like, don't worry, pew, pew, pew. I did.
I took it for you.
I was like, semantics.
Here's some food for thought. At the start of this novel, we talked about Elaine being like Feyre at the start of Mist and Fury, despondent and lost. Now, Elaine has not gone through a transformative journey yet, but we're seeing some darkness in her, just like we saw darkness in Feyre in Mist and Fury. If you remember Season 2, one of the themes in Mist and Fury was about Feyre's journey toward accepting the light and dark in her. I think we're starting to see Elaine's journey set off in that same direction, and I can't wait to see what it looks like when we get her novel. In the wake of Elaine's violent act in Chapter 75, the cauldron purrs at her. It finds her so lovely, even now when she's killed its ally, that it backs off. My new crack ship is Elaine and the cauldron, and I'm sure someone's written something smutty in fan fiction out there, right?
Oh, completely. There's smutty fanfic for everything. There are so many theories with Elaine and the cauldron. I know one of the big ones is that Elaine was pregnant when she went into the cauldron and the cauldron was jealous and took the baby. I do think that there's something that will come back to this. I personally don't think Elaine was pregnant, but I don't know. Like, I feel like it could either be a last minute addition so that we can see why Elaine got her seer powers, but I truly do believe that we're going to revisit this in her book. We see the fulfillment of Nesta's death promise to the King of Hybern when she delivers the final pass of the blade to sever his head, and through it, Nesta and Cassian are smiling. Nesta smiles through the killing process, but once she's holding his head, she's no longer smiling and just stares. To me, it's like Nesta instantly realizes that she's lost her purpose. Her whole thing was, first it was like the wall. Keep the wall up. That didn't happen. Then it was, just learning enough like power, and a lot of that didn't happen. It's like, here's the thing that she can do, and that is kill the King of Hybern. It was what she was working for, and now it's all gone.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you. So yeah, I think when she looks into his eyes, it's like everything is done. She's killed her father's killer. She doesn't have a revenge detta anymore.
Right.
For revenge detta?
Vendetta.
What I love is the cauldron's reaction. Quote, the cauldron seemed to realize what she had done too, that Elaine had defended this thief. Elaine, who it had gifted with so much power, found her so lovely, it had wanted to give her something. It would not harm Elaine, even in its hunt to reclaim what had been taken. It retreated the moment Elaine's eyes fell on our dead father, the moment the scream came out of her. The cauldron wanted to run away the second that Elaine was hurt and scared. The cauldron didn't want to take its powers back from Elaine, and it was willing to leave Nesta alone if it meant it wouldn't hurt Elaine. It sees that Elaine had protected the thief, and for me, it's giving some major question about the ending of Silver Flames, because, Nesta has to give up her powers to save Feyre, but Elaine was mad at Nesta at the time. So, right now, the cauldron isn't going after Nesta because Elaine's not mad at her. I'm not saying that, I don't know, there's a lot of questions at the end of Silver Flames I have. Quick shout out to puppy dog Bryaxis, protecting the mortals. If I get a dog, I want to name him Bryaxis. Amren slapping Feyre's face to get her to come back would piss me off. Like, bitch, I just was part of this cauldron and you're trying to wake me up with slapping me across the face. But I do appreciate how much Feyre has changed since she got the Ouroboros. It requires a different level of strength, and it just makes Feyre more of a high lady to me.
I want to go back to something about Elaine and the cauldron. We've also talked about Elaine representing the mother.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the cauldron feels shame for Elaine's what it did to contribute to Elaine's sadness. Because the cauldron, the mother, they're all tied together.
Yeah.
Or maybe that's why the cauldron loves Elaine so much, because she's tied to the mother.
I love that.
No idea. I'm just spouting nonsense now.
Here we are, just throwing shit out.
I want to express a moment of appreciation for when Varian shows up just before Amren goes into the cauldron. And Amren says, quote, like a hound on a scent. Remember when they met back in Mist and Fury? They were described as a cat and dog toying with each other. And I just really appreciate SJM's consistency and bringing little things like that back around. The cauldron breaks into 3 pieces when Feyre completes the necessary spell to unleash Amren. First off, remade women are the ones delivering the meaningful blows in this final battle. Nesta and Elaine kill the King of Hybern, while Feyre and Amren unleash Amren on the army that will ultimately end the war. And I never really appreciated that Prythian would not have survived without these 4 women. Yes, Rhys will play a role as well, but it couldn't have happened without these 4.
Rhys says something along those lines, like in the next chapter, where he's like, couldn't let the women do all the work here. And it's like, yeah, I never really took that in of like, the women did the thing here.
Yeah, and I appreciate that SJM made sure it was them.
Yeah.
We also see the power of 3 show up again here, with the cauldron breaking into 3 pieces. Significant? Probably.
Are we going to talk about it?
No. I got nothing to say other than, power of 3, 3 sisters, the 3-faced goddess.
That's everyone's homework assignment, is to send us an email talking about the significance of 3, of why it broke into 3, because there's so many ways you can interpret it. Amren's speech, when she's talking about like where she came from and her father, it alludes to a lot of multiverse stuff, and it's super sad. On that note, we are not going to get into it because that's like, we'll have Lily come back and explain this to us.
Let's look at the image of the cauldron coming apart. Quote, peeling apart like a blossoming flower. First, plosive alliteration, that's the use of P's and B's, makes the sound of explosions, like Amren exploding from the mortal shell she's in. It's a great literary device, in my opinion, and I just appreciate its use. But also, the image of a blossoming flower, potentially like a rose, somehow I feel like it's bringing it all back to Thorns and Roses.
From the first time we meet Amren, we are told that she is the last resort, that she is the thing that you bust out to really save everyone. As readers, we should have known from the second we heard that this would have happened. You don't introduce something like that and hint at it to have it not come back. Full circle.
Full circle. Once Amren wipes out the Hybern army, what is left? Quote, bright, clean light dancing on the waves. Sun, victory, it's all there. I wasn't lying.
It reminds me also of in the second book when Hybern attacks, or earlier in this book, I can't remember, when everyone puts the blood on their front door.
Oh yeah, in this book.
And it reminds me of like Moses, and it was like the mist that went and killed everyone. I mean, that's the same thing that's happening here, where she turns into that mist and kills everyone.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. It's kind of the same concept of after the Ravens, everyone put lamb's blood on their door so that Amren wouldn't attack them. And now here, everyone's staying still. All of the allies are like, don't move.
Yep.
Don't draw her attention. And she only attacks those who are running from her. Same idea.
Same idea. And it's really sweet, though, where, Feyre reminds us, the reader, she's not going to remember us. And then when Amren comes out, she does remember them.
Yeah. It gives me, I just got goosebumps.
Yeah.
I love it.
I do love it.
Rhys finds Feyre and Varian by the cauldron in chapter 67. Note all the oxymorons, a huge theme back in season 2. Lack and substance, absence and presence, made and unmade. Feyre has been described in contradictions since Mist and Fury, just like the cauldron and the Book of Breathings. And so it seems natural that she can continue to be a conduit to reform the cauldron using Rhys's power.
I feel like the Ouroboros was used to give Feyre a link with the cauldron. I don't mean to say that the mirror itself, it's just like what she went through to get to that mirror. Because Nesta and Elaine are the only ones who were actually made from the cauldron. In theory, they're the better match to be a conduit. Hell, Nesta might even do a better job of putting it back together with all of the power that she has. But of course, that's not what happens. One, we need Rhys to die to get to that scene. But I think you kind of answered it for me earlier. So yeah, I'm happy with where we're at.
also, all magic came from the cauldron, and Feyre has all 7 types of magic from the courts within her, given to her by the High Lords. So in some ways, she is the best conduit because she has all magic in her.
Yep, I love that.
What I find questionable is Feyre's knowledge of how to put the cauldron back together. Quote, I thought through the spell Amren had shown me. If I changed one small thing, it was a gamble, but it might work. I think this is just really convenient because wasn't that spell in an ancient language that Feyre doesn't understand?
Yeah, that's one of those parts where, everything I'm willing to believe, but this part was a little hard.
This was a stretch.
It was like, I'm just going to change this one word. I mean, do you know any of the words? No. Maybe she's thinking about, no, because we know what she's thinking about. I was like, maybe she's thinking about like when she was in Mist and Fury and the spell she had to remember there. But that's literally not what she said.
I mean, and here's the thing with all writing.
Sometimes you just need to get there.
It's hard to make it convincing all the time.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need things to happen.
Yep.
And for that, I don't blame her.
Yep, I agree. Let's talk about the dreaded thing, Rhys's death. Should we have known? Let's think about Rhys leading up until his actual death. When Rhys landed, his, quote, face was battered, bloody. He was stammering, shaking. I wasn't entirely sure how he was even standing. Rhys is weak, maybe at the weakest we've ever seen him. He hasn't even been able to fully withdraw his inner monster back into hiding. Rhys also has his shields up when Feyre tries to reach for his mind with hers. Quote, his shields were up, solid walls he'd erected during battle. I brushed a hand along one, but it remained. Rhys does this when he doesn't want Feyre to know his plans, which we've seen previously in this novel.
Also, Rhys isn't saying goodbye to Feyre. We are meant to be in a false sense of security. He's joking, he's charming, he's putting Feyre at ease, so we are put at ease. I also wonder if he uses a little bit of his Damati powers on her, because Rhys tells Feyre to humor him, and Feyre says, quote, I blinked. The edge of panic dulled a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he did, but that line definitely made me second guess.
I think you might be right. I never really thought about it, but now that I'm reading, I blinked, the edge of panic dulling a bit. Yes, with him, my mate.
Yeah. ... I really do think he Damati'd her.
I think so too. I wouldn't put it past him.
I wouldn't either.
Despite all these signs and warnings that SJM's giving us, we dare to hope that Rhys and Feyre will live and save the day, blah, blah, blah. So let's keep going.
Feyre remembers the map from the spring court, back in Thorns and Roses, and how the 2 female hands held the cauldron together, and all life flowed from it. Now, Feyre is the female holding the cauldron, and we could argue that the mother is the one holding the cauldron, which would make sense because Feyre is going to be a mother. I don't know. That's okay, question though. How is Feyre holding the cauldron?
She's not,
but she does describe it.
She cups her hands in front of her as if she's holding the cauldron.
Okay, because I was like, I'm imagining her like scooting up to it and like grabbing the bottom of it.
Feyre needs magic to perform this spell, and she requires more and more magic from Rhys as she reforms the cauldron. Quote, he gave it to me. Rhys handed over everything. I love you, he whispered into my mind. I felt him tremble behind me, heard his wet rasp of breath. I tried to turn. I love you, he said again. His power began to sputter, but it kept flowing out. Together, we threw everything in. We gave every last drop.
It's going to make me cry again. I'm not going to cry because you're going to laugh at me.
I won't look at you.
You didn't say you won't laugh at me. I want to point that out. You did not say I won't laugh at your pain. It was I won't look at you, so it won't inspire me to laugh.
I won't laugh at you. But I also won't look at you.
To make sure you don't laugh at me.
Yep. So Rhys gives his life when Feyre says we gave every last drop. And why are we surprised that he's dead? Let's also talk about this juxtaposition. The sun is shining, the cauldron is reformed, everyone is safe, and then Feyre turns around and Rhys is dead. It's just cruel.
It is cruel. Don't worry, you can look at me again.
I did cry when I read it. I just don't cry every time while I'm making my notes.
It was so sad. It's so sad because then she talks about like finding strength and leaning back on him and then like, just being in his arms and then like he held her while he died.
I see it all ironically because she's like, oh, I feel so much comfort. I'm safe. And I'm like, you're fucking killing your mate, dude.
Okay, but like view it from his way. He's dying the way he would have always wanted to die, with her in his arms.
That's fair. It's beautiful. It's tragic.
Yeah. Knowing that she's going to be safe. Like, they killed the king of Hybern. She's good. He's not leaving her in a shit show. Like, if he was going to go out, this is the way he'd want to do it.
Yeah.
Fuck you, Rhys.
Yeah, honestly, though.
Okay, continue.
Remember when Feyre could feel the emptiness of the loss of the bond with the Carver? That emptiness and silence has come back a millionfold with the loss of Rhys in Chapter 77, as Feyre realizes what we've all realized about Chapter 76, that it was all a goodbye, the final sacrifice Rhys has been dying to give since the beginning of this novel. And honestly, I'm surprised Feyre's not more mad at his selfishness/selflessness, just like Cassian. We see Feyre's potential anger only for a moment. Quote, "Stay with the High Lord. The Suriel's last warning. Stay, and live to see it righted. A lie, as Rhys had lied to me."
I think Feyre's in too much shock for anger right now. She's just horrified at what happened and the role that she played. Feyre kept going. She didn't stop. Not her fault, obviously, because, Rhys didn't say, hey, I'm about to die. But I would understand if later she would blame herself as well. But right now, it's just pure shock. I would like to point out that we now know what it's like for a Fae to lose their mate. Quote, "The emptiness in my chest, my soul at the lack of that bond. My body stopped being my body and just became this thing that held me, and the lack of him." For anyone who's rooting for Lucien to die, please remember this. Yes, Feyre loves Rhys, but there is a clear physical pain that we've been told and warned about when it comes to losing a mate. Another reason why I think Elaine and Lucien will end up together, because it's physically painful not to.
I mean, it's not a bad point. I hope we've convinced you of SJM's poetic nature, because we see it again here with another parallel to Under the Mountain. Feyre begs the High Lords to save Rhys, not unlike Tamlin cradling Feyre under the mountain, as the High Lords offered their kernels of power to revive Feyre. And we see Feyre's ferocity here too. Again, it's not unlike Tamlin. Feyre holds onto the bond with Rhys as Rhys once did with Feyre under the mountain. And Tamlin is the last to give his power over, just like Rhys was the last to give his power to Feyre under the mountain.
Well, also keep in mind that Rhys was the one who begged all the High Lords under the mountain.
He had planned to, but he didn't need to.
He said he was ready to convince them, but he said he asked all of them in their minds.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You're right.
So he was the one who begged them. So it's very similar. It comes back to it.
Yep.
I think SJM had this moment in her mind the moment she wrote that Thorns and Roses scene. I think she knew she wanted this 3-part arc to end the way that it started in many ways, with Feyre and Rhys holding on to one another for choosing life while others helped.
As the High Lords give Rhys their kernel of power, Feyre realizes she has to do the same on behalf of the Night Court as its High Lady. And to Jac's point, this entire episode, she's proven that she is its High Lady. The kernel of power that Feyre gives over is, quote, small as a sunflower seed. And we see the sun again. There is hope, despite the sad situation.
And because anytime SJM mentions a plant specifically, I always have to Google it. Another fun fact about sunflowers is that they represent loyalty and adoration. There's even a Greek myth about sunflowers of Clytie and Apollo. The short version, Clytie was a water nymph from Greek mythology who fell in love with Apollo and never took her eyes off of him as he flew across the sky. Eventually, she became a sunflower, forever turning her face with the course of the sun.
Tamlin shows up and Feyre notices that, quote, his new bandolier of knives was mostly empty. What a curious detail to bring up right now when Rhys is dead on the ground. Tamlin's baldric/bandolier has always been called out by Feyre since Thorns and Roses. What does it mean for him to have some knives and not be completely full like in Mist and Fury or completely empty like in Thorns and Roses? One of our listeners recently suggested that the full bandolier of knives in Mist and Fury was a symptom of Tamlin's PTSD and his need to overcompensate in order to feel safe and in control. If Tamlin's empty baldric in Thorns and Roses was a sign of his powerlessness, does having some knives but not all knives then convey to us that Tamlin is somewhere in the middle and finally his true self, as messed up as that true self might be?
I think he's like half glimmers of hope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he, the Baldric definitely means like, where is he in his own peace? And eventually, like, I think if he lives, he'll have a full Baldric again, but it won't be because of PTSD. It'll be because he's ready to fight on.
I'd like to see him retire the Baldric and Bandolier.
And then pick up something else. Like he really needs to find a different
He needs
weapon.
to find something else.
Yeah. I do think that Tamlin, the whole thing with him is sad because when Feyre begs Tamlin to help, that she will give him anything, he tells her his request to her is to be happy. That is his gift. That is what he asks. Like, come on, people. Like, he saved Feyre in the camp and now he's saving Rhys, and SJM is like, cool, guys. He's going to have his redemption one day.
Nobody likes Tamlin. He's a misogynist. He's a jerk.
An abuser.
He's an abuser. Like, there are so many reasons to dislike Tamlin, but there is a kernel of good in him, and we have seen it in the last few episodes. So we can't deny its possibility of redemption.
People ask, and we don't think this is him being redeemed, but people always ask us, do you think he deserves a redemption arc? I think he's been redeemed to be redeemed. Like, he's earned the battle to redeem himself.
And redemption does not mean happiness, love, or life.
Yep. So just keep that in mind, guys, when we talk redemption.
Listeners have said before that this story is very Howl's Moving Castle. And I have to acknowledge that in this scene in particular, it makes me think of the Miyazaki animated film. As Tamlin gives over his power and Rhys comes back to life with Feyre draped over him, and then we find Amren is alive too, it is very reminiscent of the fact that Sophie gives Howl back his heart, and in doing so, Calcifer is set free and somehow remains alive, and Howl gets to stay alive too. And I'm not complaining. I love the scene, so I just wanted to acknowledge the parallel there. I also find it hilarious that for two females who fight a lot, Mor is the one to run to Amren's aid when we all learn that Amren is in the cauldron. I also want to note that Amren vomits as she emerges from the cauldron, a clear indication of her weakness and mortality when we think about how vomiting has been a sign of humanity in the past.
You and I always talk about Amren coming back and whether it makes sense or not. We think she should have died, but for future book purposes, it makes sense why she didn't. Also, I always imagined her naked when she comes back, but she's not.
Me too.
Yeah, and I don't know why I get bothered with the fact that she still has clothes.
Yeah, because she would have burned them off when she became an angel of fire.
Yeah, so I don't know. In my mind, she's naked. Not in a sexy way. In a rebirth way.
Yeah, yep, agreed. And that wraps up our episode.
Let's go into our 2 breadcrumbs. In chapter 71, Feyre thinks of Cassian and Nesta. Did he know that she had screened for him, knowing he'd come, that she'd done it to save him? Perhaps Nesta's instinct to save Cassian is more her mating bond instincts and less about knowing the exact direction the cauldron would aim.
I think so.
I like that, where it's like, I don't know where you are, but Cassian!
You're gonna die!
Yeah.
In chapter 77, when Feyre demands that the High Lords bring Rhys back, Helion says, quote, "You were a human. It's not the same." I wonder if this is a breadcrumb for Rhys potentially becoming High King of Prythian. This is my speculation. Rhys is already the strongest High Lord ever, and now he's going to have a kernel of every court's power. He didn't steal their abilities, but he has a kernel of their power. It makes sense to me that he could become High King of Prythian with all of that power, especially since Feyre also has those same kernels of power. She could be his High Queen.
Oh boy, our second to last question.
Second to last.
Is the way the final battle sequence written believable, or does too much happen?
Before analyzing Wings and Ruin, I would have characterized this book as too much shit happens.
Yeah.
So much happens. But all of it has a purpose, and all of it leads up to make this final sequence believable, in my mind.
When I look at it chapter by chapter and analyzing chapter by chapter, well, yes, of course this would lead into the next chapter. Of course this would build into the plot. Like, it all makes sense when you look at it chapter by chapter, but I can understand when you pull back and you're like, we just looked into, how many pages was that? Only 52 pages. Way less than 100.
Yeah.
And we get so much that happens. So I understand where it's like information or plot development overload. But when you go chapter by chapter and you analyze it, it flows.
And this is how SJM does all of her writing. All of her books are this way.
Yeah.
There is so much information, so much buildup, so many plot points that feel obscure until you get to the end and you see how it's all interwoven and how it all was necessary to make this moment believable.
I mean, look at how much we shat on Feyre the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
It was to get to the Ouroboros. And then suddenly her mastery of the Ouroboros is what led her to be able to, master the cauldron. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of things that had to lead to this. Like, Feyre couldn't have started this book being a cocky high lady, couldn't have betrayed Tamlin and all that stuff in order for her to learn, to grow, to get the Ouroboros, to come here. Like, it all happens for a reason. It's just so much in a short amount of time, but that doesn't mean it's unrealistic.
Right. It's just a lot to process.
Yeah. I mean, and battles happen quickly.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What do we know?
What do we know of ancient war?
But yeah, it's good. I get why people say it, but I understand it better now. I don't think she did a bad job. I think she did a great job.
She being SJM.
She being you and me. And SJM.
And now here's this week's featured review from Apple Podcasts.
And this week's review comes from Tenuvale. It's titled BFFF, Best Fae Friends Forever. Seriously cannot express how much I enjoyed this podcast. The insightful discussions of books I love have been so much fun to delve into. And the way that you two speak out for and support women, chef's kiss.
Aw, thank you.
We love women here.
Obviously, I love women.
I love women in the way that I do.
In the heterosexual way that you are capable of loving women.
But, like, support the crap out of them.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, women are great. And
yes.
The more I read SJM, the more I realize she loves women, too.
It did take a minute to get there.
It did take a while to get there.
Yeah.
But I realize now that, no, her agenda is women.
Absolutely. And the fact that we have 96% female audience shows that we're doing something right.
Woohoo!
Woo!
And if you would like to be featured on the podcast, please leave us a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week is our season finale, where we will be exploring chapters 78 through 82 of A Court of Wings and Ruin.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our forum at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a weekly mini episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon, Ko-Fi, or Venmo. You can also follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk. Bye!
Fall has officially started here in Los Angeles, and that means we finally get to do fall activities.
I have been counting down the days for when I can go to pumpkin patches, maybe even hit up an apple orchard, and I get to do all of it looking super cute in my Quince boyfriend sweater.
This weather is perfect for my dark academia vibes, and I'm so excited to bust out my washable silk blouse because you know I'm going to be taking pictures.
Quince is known for their Mongolian cashmere sweaters from $50. And that's not all. Quince has so many other amazing things on their website.
All of those items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
That includes leather jackets, cotton cardigans, soft denim. Like, my entire fall wardrobe is genuinely turning into Quince wardrobe.
By partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the cost of the middleman, we get savings as the customer.
One of my favorite parts about Quince is the fact that they only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices. And they still manage to get premium fabrics and finishes for that, luxury feeling for every item that they have.
Get cozy in Quince's high-quality wardrobe essentials. Go to quince.com/booktalk for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/booktalk, BOOKTALK, to get free shipping and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/booktalk.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per detail.